Good morning. Welcome to our webinar today, Preventing and Addressing Eviction Through Community Partnerships. We received very high demand for this webinar, and we are grateful that you're taking time out of your morning to join us today and discuss this important topic. My name is Faye Gordon. I am the Regional Administrator for the Administration for Community Living in Region 9, and I'm happy to be serving as your facilitator for today's discussion. As a regional administrator, I represent ACL and coordinate with the Aging and Disability Networks in the Department of Health and Human Services Region 9. This means I work closely with Nevada, Arizona, Hawaii, CNMI, Guam, American Samoa, and one of today's presenters, California. Today's webinar is a continuation of our September 30th presentation, Emergency Rental Assistance Programs, Tools to Assist the People You Serve. That webinar's recording, the slides, and transcripts are all available on acl.gov. Over the next 60 minutes, our goal is to explore in detail two models of advocacy partnerships working to protect and stabilize housing security for people who are at risk of or currently facing an eviction. This webinar is being recorded, and by staying to view the webinar, you consent to the recording. As you settle in, we want to know more about the work you're doing and what the people you're working with are experiencing. So we're going to set up a brief poll window on the side of your screen. And while that poll gets set up and the questions appear, I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping. So let's go ahead and bring that poll up. Let's see. All right, so here's the poll. I'll read the poll question. In the last 2 months, has the number of your clients that are at risk of eviction or have already been evicted, and then you have a few options, has that increased a lot, increased some, has it stayed the same, has it decreased? Do you not currently work with clients that are dealing with an eviction, or is this question completely not applicable to you? So while you answer that, let me just do some brief housekeeping. This webinar is in listen-only mode. That means your microphone and phone are and will remain muted. And so if you need technical assistance, please send an email. The email address is hsrc@acl.hhs.gov. And that email address will be in the chat box if you have any trouble finding it. You can engage with our speakers today and submit questions throughout the presentation. You'll simply click on the Q&A icon on your screen, type in your question, and submit. We will address all of those questions at the end. You can also send in questions or any issues that you're having to that hsrc@acl.hhs.gov email. That link is in your chat box. So now that we've gone over most of the housekeeping issues, I do want to go back to the poll and we can see what the responses are. So let's go ahead and open up that poll. So this is very telling. All right, looking at this poll, 1/5 of you are seeing clients with an significant increase in evictions. 37% say you've seen some increase in eviction in your clients, and another 1/5 say things have stayed relatively the same. This means that only about 25% of you are actually seeing a decrease, or you're not working with clients facing eviction, or this doesn't really apply to you. So clearly for the vast majority of you, you're seeing evictions, some of you are seeing an increase, and this topic is particularly relevant. So going back to our presentation, just one brief other housekeeping piece that I want to touch on. There's going to be a lot of information shared today and a lot of questions. ACL will develop a frequently asked question document. It will be posted with the slides and a recording on the ACL website at acl.gov. So let's get into an introduction to our topic. As all of you know clearly from the poll results and your interest in this webinar, we have an affordable housing crisis in this country, and that is a crisis that began well before the COVID-19 pandemic, but one that has significantly increased under COVID. We know that currently there's no county in the country that has enough affordable housing for its lowest income residents. So as a result of this, half of renters are paying over 30% of their income in rent, and 1/4 of renters are paying over half of their income. So half of their paycheck is already gone from rent. And so for far too many people, this means they are living with housing instability and they are living with the threat of eviction every day. The other challenge that we know is that evictions are notoriously difficult to track. Prior to COVID-19, the Eviction Lab estimated there were nearly 3.6 million eviction filings that resulted in 1.5 million eviction judgments annually. But even with these high numbers, we know that back then, and even more so now, this is likely an undercount due to informal evictions, illegal evictions, and forced moves. So facing this crisis together, we have to work collaboratively. And this webinar is one example of our commitment to partner and work in coordination and understand what everyone is doing to confront this challenge. We also know that this housing and eviction crisis is much bigger than the tools that we will discuss today. It's going to require large-scale change beyond the scope of our discussion today. But it's important to recognize that many organizations are working tirelessly to protect people's rights to housing, and we must be aware of that work and connected to that work and work in partnership together. So recognizing the magnitude of this challenge, we're very excited to hear from two organizations, Disability Rights California and Disability Rights Texas, and their partners who are implementing critical legal interventions and services to protect housing rights. Our partners will introduce themselves in just a moment. I'm going to briefly introduce the Administration for Community Living. The Administration for Community Living, or ACL, funds and oversees networks of disability and aging organizations in all 50 states and in the US territories. These networks include over 20,000 community-based organizations that collectively provide direct services, legal advocacy, and work on systems change for older adults, people with disabilities, and their families. ACL's aging and disability networks play an important role in helping people access services and housing and assisting with transitioning people from institutions back to the community. At ACL, we know how critical it is to keep people stably housed. And the number one question ACL receives from people within our networks is how to get help with affordable, accessible housing. Without stable housing, many people with disabilities and older adults are often forced to live in an institution, such as a nursing home, or they face homelessness. And so in recognizing that this is a critical goal, we want to work to increase access to information, prevent evictions, and avoid costly legal actions. This is all an urgent agency goal. And so to this end, ACL funds important elder justice and civil rights advocacy programs, which include the protection and advocacy systems that we're hearing from today, Older Americans Act Legal Services, the National Center on Law and Elder Rights, and more. So today we're very excited to hear from two states and their protection and advocacy systems, Disability Rights California and Disability Rights Texas. These protection and advocacy systems, also known as PNAs, are dedicated to the ongoing fight for personal and civil rights of people with disabilities. PNAs are independent service providing agencies. They work at the state level to protect people with disabilities and empower them and advocate for them on their behalf. Housing, specifically evictions, is one of the areas in which PNAs are supporting the disability community. And so with that, I want to turn the floor back to our partners in California from Disability Rights California for us to learn more about the work they're doing to address evictions. Thank you so much, Christian, Jimin, and Elisa for presenting today, and we cannot wait to hear from you. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Christian Abasto. I am the legal director of Disability Rights California. Are we going to do introductions or should I just go to the presentation? Jimin, do you want to introduce yourself and then Elisa?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jimin Chang. I am a supervising attorney at Disability Rights California.
And good morning, everyone. My name is Elisa Neary, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker and working as a consultant with Disability Rights California around their homelessness prevention housing stability project.
So before we start the slides, I think a little background so everybody can understand what Disability Rights California does. Disability Rights California is one of the largest legal service providers in the nation. We have around 300 employees, although we provide a variety of services throughout the state of California. The portion that I lead and the significant portion of the services that we provide are free legal services to persons with disability. So the perspective that we are presenting to you today is a lawyer's perspective. So I think it's important for the audience to understand that our perspective, we have a lot of lawyers The organization is led by lawyers, and our primary goal is to be a law firm to provide legal representation. One of the key aspects of this, though, that early on we realized that our perspective was not sufficient, that lawyers alone could not tackle these problems of eviction, of homelessness, of housing stability. So that's why part of our presentation is going to be an explanation of collaboration with social workers, and that's Elisa Neary is the consultant that's working with us in developing a social work program, so lawyers and social workers can work together to battle this issue. Should we start the slide, please? You've already, Faye already presented the horrible statistics pre-pandemic about homelessness. COVID has made things worse, which is terribly depressing. Just so you'll know, I've been a legal services attorney for over 20 years, and my specialty is housing and homelessness. So it is pretty depressing when COVID hit, and after many years, it's sort of the housing and homelessness crisis has been worse. So that's I think that's the main theme of this presentation, is that we're in a crisis. COVID has made the housing crisis worse, but that doesn't mean we give up. That means we need to work together. We need to partner, and the best way to help our clients who are facing homelessness is in partnership with other agencies, with other types of service providers, so we can tackle some of these issues and make some progress. Next slide, please. So these are the three key partnerships, right? And this presentation is going to be very broad, very big picture, from 1,000 miles up high, because the eviction process, the housing process, the services are so very local, right? There is no national law on evictions. Each locality, each state has different rules, and the services, each state provides services, each locality has different services. So we're taking this as broad as possible, so it's applicable for everybody. What we found is that three key partnerships, and a lot of you actually are either legal service providers or social services providers. So if one of these apply to you, then you need to find the other partners sort of to help you tackle this issue. The first one, the big issue, obviously, because of the COVID crisis, a lot of the evictions are based because of the lack of funding. So financial assistance, finding partners that have the financial assistance to provide rental assistance is key. And developing those partnerships either at a statewide level, local level, and there's many types of financial assistance out there. The key is finding those partnerships and developing those partnerships so you can get your clients access to financial assistance. The second one is social workers, social services, case management. A lot of housing stability, housing crisis is created because of social issues, because you've lost your job, because of depression, etc., because of mental health issues. So it's important that you bring in professionals who stabilize in social services and case management to create some stability. So when you provide financial assistance, the problem doesn't recur, and then you can create stability. And the final piece is what we do, what Disability Rights California does. Evictions are a legal process, and there are local nuances, state nuances, federal nuances that can be very difficult for our clients to understand, can be very difficult for us to understand. So as part of this process, when you're creating a strategy on how to tackle this issue, it is very important that you get yourself a legal service partner and that you have developed some basic understanding, because that will be a primary driving issue when you're dealing with clients facing eviction. They'll come to you with papers and say, my landlord's evicting, what do I do? You want to be able to help them with that. You want to have some basic knowledge of the eviction process, and you want to be able to refer them, in best case scenario, give warm referrals to legal service clients. So that's it. Next slide, please. I think, Jimin, you're next.
Good morning again, everyone. So Previous to working at Disability Rights California, I worked on a medical legal partnership through a legal aid organization. And what I realized in my work doing medical legal partnership is that the role of attorneys isn't really well understood in the broader community. So I wanted to start first with what a lawyer can do in housing situations, and specifically with evictions. So what a lawyer can do is negotiate with the landlord. We can help resolve legal issues, represent in court, and enforce settlement. Some of these things tenants are able to do on their own. And I think because of the scarcity of legal services and lawyers available to do this type of work, a lot of times we provide advice and we provide tools to enable our clients to be able to handle some of these things on the front end on their own. And it's when things have completely fallen apart with the landlord's not responsive, the landlord's very aggressive and harassing, that we then we step in. Next slide, please. So as Christian mentioned, Disability Rights California, we cover all of California. And so there are many, many counties and cities in California, and evictions are handled pretty differently in each jurisdiction. Each court has different rules. So one really vital partner for us is the local legal aid, because they have experience with the big landlords that are in those areas, and they know how the courts work. They know what the court clerks are like and what the judges are like, and that specific knowledge is really crucial to the resolution of these types of cases. And so one recommendation for you, and certainly something that we work on as well, is to find trusted legal aid providers in order to provide trainings to your staff and basically demystify what the process is like to engage with a legal aid attorney. I recognize that a lot of people either don't know that they can access free legal aid, or they are too intimidated to call an attorney. And so it's really, I think, one crucial role that you all can play is to help demystify that process and basically help usher people in through the door for their local legal aid. It's important to screen the legal aid provider to make sure that they are reliable and free. Googling lawyers, I think, can be full of traps. So you just don't know what you might end up with. So I'll talk a little bit more about how to find a reliable legal aid partner to work closely with, and also to refer your clients to. It's also important to make sure that it's kind of an ongoing relationship rather than just kind of one-off referrals. I find that it's really valuable for different partner organizations to do cross-training with each other so that we know how to cross-refer to each other. And then, of course, maintaining the relationships are really crucial in order to have the very valuable tool of warm handoff referrals, as opposed to giving your clients a phone number to call, which they may or may not follow up on, and which I found in the past that they frequently did not follow up on. Next slide, please. So the Legal Services Corporation funds legal aids throughout the country. And so your local legal aid provider most likely is funded by LSC. So the way to get in to find out who they are and what their contact information is, I recommend going to the lsc.gov website. That's the Legal Services Corporation. Outside of that network of the LSC funded organizations. There are other smaller legal aids depending on which area you're in. In the major metropolitan areas, there are more options for free legal aid providers. In the rural areas, there are fewer. And so Law Help, your state will have a Law Help website, which you can go to. And so ours is Law Help California, so lawhelpca.org. And if we get a caller who is in a rural area who we need to connect with their local legal aid, and I don't know who it is, I would typically go to Law Help to figure that out, or to the lsc.gov website. Disability Rights California is a protection and advocacy system, and your state or your area will have a P&A that covers your area and will provide services for people with disabilities. So you can go to the NDRN, National Disability Rights Network, in order to find out who your local P&A is. And I see that our executive director, Andy, put that link in the chat as well. Thank you, Andy. Next slide, please. So just quickly about DRC's Housing Stability Project. This is a brand new project that we are still working on developing, and we're focusing on finding legal service providers that are local, because as I mentioned, it is important to have that local knowledge. And also because our offices are all over California, and someone might not live close to one of our offices, it might be easier transportation wise for them to get to their local legal aid. What we realized would be very crucial for the success of our project is to have in-house social workers, because as legal services attorneys, we frequently end up playing this hybrid role of attorney and social workers. And as an attorney, I really am not equipped to do that piece of the work. So we decided that social workers would be a crucial in-house resource that we needed. So currently we are working on developing that, and Elisa is helping us to do that. Just a quick client story. We had a client who had received an eviction notice. No, she had received an eviction court papers, and she had kind of burned bridges with her local legal aid, and so was very reluctant to go to her local legal aid, but they were really the only ones who could help her avoid a default in the eviction. And so we called them up and arranged for a warm handoff, as well as did a lot of persuasion with our client to make sure that she would go get connected with them. And she did do that and avoided the default eviction as a result. And I'll turn things over to Elisa.
Thanks, Jermaine. Next slide, please. So I want to just highlight a little bit about the kind of the benefits of collaborating with social services or a case manager around these issues. Our goal, whether we're working from the legal side or providing the financial assistance or providing case management support, our goals are kind of twofold. The first is to resolve the immediate housing crisis, meaning to stabilize housing in the moment. But our second goal is to identify what are the factors or the circumstances that contributed to this housing instability, so that we can address those and ideally prevent future instances of housing instability or risk of homelessness. So that's kind of where social services comes in. Not only can we serve as a kind of a spokesperson and a conduit to some of the other services, connecting or linking people to services, but we can also do a thorough assessment to understand what puts someone at risk of this situation happening again, and what can we do to address it. For example, I worked with a couple some years ago, an aging couple. They were living on Social Security income, just barely making ends meet. and at some point somehow got behind and were playing catch up month after month after month. And eventually they just couldn't catch up. And so when we got to them, they were at risk of losing their housing. And we were able to stabilize their housing, but we were also able to understand their income needs and what income resources that they had, and recognize that they were eligible for some additional benefits through the VA that they had never tapped into. And so their case manager worked with them to fill out paperwork, to connect with the VA, to go through that lengthy and kind of complicated process of applying for those benefits, which then led to much more stable housing in the long term because their income changed. So that's what social services can bring this kind of ongoing contact, identifying issues, and then monitoring and supporting through the longer term resolution of those issues that could contribute to future housing instability. Next slide, please. Financial assistance, we can also kind of broker and connect people to sources of financial assistance in the community. There is a fair amount of support out there right now in the form of rental arrears, rental assistance, and utility assistance to help people stabilize. It's just a matter of figuring out who in your community provides those services. But when someone's facing eviction, in addition to all the various supportive services we can provide, it's often very necessary to get them caught up on their rent. And sometimes if the solution or if the process of getting stabilized is going to take a number of months, sometimes we can get rental assistance moving forward for a designated period of time while the household, while everything stabilizes in the household. So the next slide gives you a resource or a link to a site where you can go to find out who in your community might be providing financial assistance in the form of rent and utility supports. So I would encourage you to check those out and see what exists in your community that you connect with. I'm going to turn it back over to Jamin.
Actually, this should be Christian.
Okay, I'll take it. Okay, so let's repeat this. I hopefully through our presentation you've seen sort of the benefits and the benefits. The benefits of partnership, it's holistic wraparound process. There's different ways of calling it, taking care of all the issues of the client. There's efficiency and benefit of coordinating these services. The more you can coordinate, the better partnerships you have, I think ultimately is better for the clients. Ease of access for clients is very important. As Jamin alluded, sometimes giving a phone number to another service provider is not enough, because in moments of crisis, calling another service provider can be overwhelming. So ensuring easy ways, warm referrals, co-locating, etc., making it as easy as possible for clients in crisis that are facing this crisis to get services is of utmost importance. Benefits of partnership, resolution of multiple interrelated issues, right? As there's a beauty with workers, social workers, case managers, etc., all these services working together, in that the lawyers can focus on legal issues and social workers can focus on the social issues, and that's what they're trained for. And then ultimately, it's about stabilizing, the increased likelihood of stabilizing for the long term, not just the short term. So those are the benefits of partnership. Next slide, please. So just some basic tips that a lot of this is just a common sense approach, but it's worth repeating. I call it toolkit for developing partnerships. Most of your partnerships will develop informally. A lot of it you just have to call people. Cold call people and introduce yourself. And obviously, a lot of organizations, legal services agencies, social services, they have similar mission, values, and goals. And developing partnerships with organizations that have similar values is important. One way to escalate and to make deeper commitments is by entering into written agreements, memorandum of understandings, or contracts to provide joint services for your clients. And then one of the cool things about this that historically I have done successfully is once you start formalizing and you figure out you're a good fit with another organization that provides complementary services, you can actually start seeking funding, right? So Joint collaborative services it does require more time from your staff, right? Because it does require more investment. So that's a next stage of those partnerships where you seek funding to fund this collaborative team that you've developed. One key thing in developing these relationships is you have dedicated staff who are good at networking that maintain these relationships for you. Just a couple of key concepts: warm handoffs are better than phone numbers, than cold referrals, so clients don't get lost. That's worth repeating a bunch of times. And here's a concept that I love that is actually difficult to execute and probably requires a lot of funding, but I'm always striving to do. Co-located social services are like the premier best way of providing services. So clients can go to a one-stop shop where they have lawyers, financial assistants, and social workers to take care of all of these issues. I realize in a lot of jurisdictions that's impossible to have because of travel, rural communities, et cetera. And this co-located environment probably favors urban environments, but that is sort of aspirational dream, right? Where everything's handled in one space, so clients aren't shuttling back and forth looking for assistance. So that's a dream. I think, is that the last slide? I think that's the last slide. Cool. Okay, I will hand it off to our friends from Texas.
Thank you. My name is Rachel Cohen-Miller. I'm the supervising attorney for the Housing, Transportation, and Disaster Team with Disability Rights Texas. I'm going to hand it off to Casey to introduce herself.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Casey Flansbaum. I'm the advocate supervisor for the Housing, Transportation, and Disaster Team at Disability Rights Texas. I'll hand off to John.
Thanks, Casey. And I'm John Hasley. I'm the Deputy Director of Litigation at Legal Aid of Northwest Texas.
Thanks, all. So I want to take a couple seconds and kind of give an overview of what we're going to talk about today. Accommodations and collaboration with local legal aid have really been instrumental to the work that we have been doing at Disability Rights Texas to try to serve as many people as possible. And we have, we've all got limited resources. I know everybody on the call understands that. And so we use accommodations to do that. And we also collaborate with local legal aids to do that. And this first slide gives you a kind of a rundown of what we're going to talk about. Next slide, please. So accommodations generally are just a change to rules, policies, practices to make sure people with disabilities have same opportunities as other people, right? Equal playing field is what we're aiming for. Unless the disability is apparent on its face, so somebody uses mobility or somebody has a mobility impairment and uses something to help them. And generally, you're going to need a letter or a note from a provider or somebody that understands the situation, not necessarily a provider, that explains why this person needs a change. And this will come together a little bit more on the next slide, for the next couple. Okay, so Casey and I work together quite a bit. We're going to talk about staying housed, how we try to ensure people get to stay housed. And, we talked about accommodations. And so we're talking about a change in policy that potentially you could, policy generally could be like, consumer or the client has to pay rent on the first of the month, but they're waiting for rental relief. You can try to have landlord change the date and maybe give them a little bit of time if they're waiting on that rental relief. We develop generators, and what generators are for us or in our world is it's a web page, and we have it linked right there where you can go or the clients can go and make a letter, right? Fill in a bunch of blanks, and effectively what it'll do is it'll give them a letter to send to the landlord saying, okay, here's your policy. I need you to change it. Casey, I'm going to hand off to you for an example.
Yeah, so in practice with our generators and with our work, what we found, especially on the advocate side, is letting landlords know very gently and politely, obviously, that they are not unique to this housing crisis, especially during COVID. Finding tenants who are able to pay full rent, especially with the really, really significantly high cost and rental prices, is difficult. So retaining your residents and making sure that you don't have empty units has been really helpful. So we've been using our generator Our clients have been using our generator. Specifically, we have a client who was waiting on rental relief. They are at high risk of COVID transmission should they become homeless. And we were able to appeal to the humanity of the housing provider and say, there's rental relief coming. Here's documentation that it's coming. Please let them stay. And it has been successful in multiple occasions.
Thanks, Casey. Next slide, please. So one of the other things that we are seeing consistently is, people are getting evicted by the time they come to us, they're already out. And so what do we do, practically speaking, to help get people housed? Because that's a really, it's a big deal, right? Everybody's seeing that right now. The biggest things that we have been seeing, aside from, lack of funding, which is obviously something that we're all trying to help people with, is that because somebody's been evicted, it's now on their record. And so when they go apply to a new place, the new place looks at, runs their background and says, oh, you've had an eviction, last year, we're not going to rent to you. Or if, let's say they owe the landlord money, landlord evicted them, let's say they couldn't work because they had COVID, and so they get evicted. And so it shows up when a potential landlord runs their background and says, oh, you owe another landlord money, we're not going to rent to you. One of the things that you can ask is landlord, hey, landlord, this is the only reason this happened to our client is because they're a person with disability, they got COVID, and they've had symptoms for quite some time. Can you change your policy and not look at that one eviction, because the only reason it happened is because they're a person with a disability. And that has been pretty successful. Casey?
Yeah, so in this situation, and I am not an attorney, I am an advocate, and I feel strongly that my role in these situations actually are really helpful, because it is less intimidating to get a letter from an advocate rather than getting a letter from an attorney if you're a housing provider. So when we do these types of accommodation requests, again, very gently, very politely, we're bringing up to the housing provider, we are in a global pandemic, people are at risk. By allowing for this accommodation, you are doing something important for this person, and it's working. The pandemic, the housing crisis has forced us to become more creative, which I think has been good for our work. Because before this, we would have never been looking into asking for an accommodation to ignore debt, ignore an eviction, ignore owed debt, things like that. So I think this has been really helpful. Back to you, Rachel.
Thank you. Next slide. So Casey, I'm going to have you look at this, that you explain this one, because you do a really good job of doing this one.
Yeah, so as hard as we work and as tirelessly as we work, our work really benefits from letters of support and just support in general from healthcare providers, social workers, anybody who knows the client, knows the person, understands what they're going through. It's great to have something come on our letterhead. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's okay. The letters of support are really what seals the deal for a lot of our accommodation requests. So these letters are really easy. 3 or 4 main parts just state how you know the person asking for the accommodation, what their disability or the symptoms of their disability affects in their daily life activities, and then how the request or the accommodation could ameliorate those symptoms. So if you have a client with severe anxiety, receiving multiple notices to vacate, not evictions, notices to vacate, you can say what this action is creating severe manifestations of my client or this person's disabilities. This is why stopping these notifications while we wait for financial support or while they move out will help. These things make a huge difference and really are the reason that we see a lot of success. Back to you, Rachel.
Thank you. So the next slide, please. And this one talks a lot about our collaboration with our legal aids here in Texas. We're very lucky. We've got John Hasley with us, to talk about our collaboration and the work that we've done together. John?
Thanks, Rachel. And I know we're running a little short on time, so I'll just be really quick here. But in terms of this, collaboration, obviously the goal is to maximize the number of, clients and individuals for us, whether it's a low-income community or individuals with disabilities that we can reach. And so in doing so, I think our relationship with Disability Rights Texas, we've always had a great relationship, but it began back, I think, in 2017 when we got money to do community redevelopment work, and specifically to Disability Rights California's point, having an MOU with the organization. We had an MOU with them and other providers throughout the state to do work in affordable fair housing context, right? And so over these last 4 years, our relationship has strengthened and grown. And so I can't overstate the importance of creating those relationships, right? So it's the relationships because, for example, with legal aid, this resources component, we have a very large staff. Just like Disability Rights California, we have almost 300 staff, 150 attorneys, and we have a wealth of knowledge and expertise, as you see here, in multiple substantive areas of the law. But as well, Disability Rights Texas as the P&A for the state has their own expertise as well in areas that we need assistance in, and where our staff could benefit from their help, right? And so what we do is we partner, and that's the next, you'll see the training. Rachel and her team have provided training specifically on disability and housing, whether it's law issue spotting or representation during COVID, like they're talking about these form generators, to where we can get this information out to our partners and to our partner agencies. It's already hard enough. You've heard about the assistance and people trying to obtain rental assistance and not knowing what resources are out there and available, right, to help prevent these evictions. We are seeing it every day when you're going into court and you're, as you heard from California, the jurisdiction, every jurisdiction is different. Every state is different in terms of what types of protections they have or lack thereof. Like in Texas, we don't necessarily have the same protections as in some states. And because of that, evictions have been ongoing. And so it's been extremely important for us to be able to work with our local nonprofit partners and our agencies to let them know what the state of the law, because it's constantly changing. Like our Supreme Court's coming out with new emergency orders all the time, stating what the court has to do in terms of informing tenants of their rights. And so part of what our relationship with Disability Rights Texas has allowed us to do with those form generators and with others is to keep our tenants in the home as long as possible, right? And it can prevent an eviction or even post eviction if they are trying to find a new place, and because of their negative rental history, the landlord's not willing to provide assistance. Just by providing a letter or getting that assistance from Disability Rights Texas, we've been able to help a lot of these individual clients in that circumstance to help find a new place, even though they have that negative rental history. Next slide, please. And so establishing the relationship, I think it honestly is going, and you heard it before, finding where there might be some correlation between the work that you do, or maybe there's a service that you don't provide that someone else does, reach out to them. That's the most important thing you can do. That's how I did it with Rachel and with Chris McGreal and the Disability Rights Texas team, was just to say, hey, we do this. I know you're doing this. Can we work together? And maybe making it a component of a grant. You also heard that as well, and then eventually applying for grants together. And then in terms of reaching out to legal aid when the consumer has an issue, I would say, do it immediately, right? Because you don't know if there's going to be a deadline or a statute of limitations or an emergency. Send them to us. We have different intake portals, whether it's a phone line, a hotline, an online application. And so just send them to us. But I know we're running late, so I'll go ahead and pass it back.
Wonderful. John, thank you so much. That was very impressive, putting all that information in, and to all of our speakers. Thank you for sharing all of this information. We have about 15 minutes left, and we have two goals for sort of the last part of this presentation. First, we want some conversation with our panelists, reflecting from each other. So I'll introduce that in a moment, and then we'll do question and answers from the group. So we heard from Disability Rights California speaking about the Housing Stability Project and their model, looking at these three prongs of financial assistance, legal assistance, and social services. We heard from Disability Rights Texas talking about some specific examples with their generator and accommodations and working with the landlords and partnering through the MOU with legal aid. I would love to hear from our speakers some reactions to what you heard from each other. California, did you hear anything from Texas that would apply and work in California, or that maybe doesn't work, and vice versa? Really any new ideas generated, or here's what worked for us and didn't work for us? Would love some discussion. So I'll keep it very broad if anyone would like to start the discussion. We'll do this for about 5-6 minutes and then we'll switch to Q&A.
I love the reasonable accommodation generator. I think that's a great way of making legal writing and requests for reasonable accommodations accessible to clients. So that's something we're going to look at. I love the work they're doing post eviction, because that's the reality that a lot of times we can't prevent the eviction. So the next stage is finding housing for somebody who's about to be evicted or delaying the eviction. So that's something that Texas is doing a lot more than we are. So that would be sort of a focus for us for our next stage.
Can I go? Can Texas go?
Please, yes, please. I was like, I think Rachel's trying to speak. Yes, thank you.
Yes, I'm really good at, jumping right in. I love the idea that you were talking about with dedicated people to maintaining relationships, because that's one of the biggest hurdles that I think we have is, maintaining those relationships. I mean, John and I have known each other for years now, and that's a pretty easy one. I can text him and say, hey, what's going on? Or do you have a minute? But we all have so much on our plate. It's really hard to really, who's doing what. And so I think one of the things that we're going to do probably next week early is figure out who's got what relationships internally and, kind of make sure that we're really working on that and that we're not overlapping and that those are continued. Because I think that's something that we can really improve on, that California is doing, great job on.
Yeah, and I know, Rachel, and as well, Mr. Avasto, you mentioned the seeking funding, and I think that's something we probably would look at it in the future, because I think we've gotten to that point where we have such a positive relationship, but I would say an interconnection between all the work that we're doing, that we would probably have a project that we could put together and take that next step. And I think you also mentioned about co-locating offices, and I know warm handoffs is something that we focus on, but I think just taking that to the next level, and it could then hopefully serve as a model for some of the other agencies throughout our state.
Yeah, I'll echo John on the warm handoff that y'all were talking about. That is really, we're able to do that with certain groups because, again, we've got these relationships, but I think the more we work on, the dedicated people to certain relationships, I think actually they're going to go hand in hand, because you'll be able to do that a little easier. And so that is, I think you get more success that way.
Can I just ask a question for reflection? And if there's something else that you want to address, please disregard it. But something, as we're all together, both of you represent very large states that are very diverse with very distinct rural and urban needs. And I'm curious how I think for California, as you built this housing stability project, I mean, do you have to change it depending on where people are in the state? And how do you make those relationships local when you're dealing with such a large population for both of you? And similarly, with Texas, are there certain areas that you focus on that are more sort of crisis areas of eviction? How do you prioritize when the need is so great?
For us, we're intentional, strategic. I mean, it's never ending, right? We've done GIS mapping to see where the needs are, and the needs are always changing. So we just have to remain flexible, look at data, and modify, right? How we basically allocate our resources. We have offices throughout the state. We have small offices, large offices, but we only have I think 10 staff dedicated to this, right? We provide a lot of other lead. So it's just flexibility. It's basically filling the gaps, because there's a lot of resources in the big city. So a lot of our focus is in rural areas that have transportation, communication gaps. A lot of our focus is on clients whose language, English, is not the first, right, that are underserved. So it's just, we have to stay flexible and always focus on where we can have the maximum impact. So there's no easy formula for this. It's a struggle, right?
I'd like to add too that the pandemic really has made the relationship building with especially the rural areas easier. because we're all just used to being on Zoom now. And some of the larger organizations that provide like technical assistance and do policy work, such as the Western Center on Law and Poverty and National Housing Law Project, they pull together all the different groups for meetings in order to discuss what's happening. So we've been able to connect with people in those areas in that way as well.
I think our approach has been real similar in terms of the ability to be flexible, because things are, particularly in Texas where, we had late last week, they shut funding down for rental assistance statewide. And so you have localities that are small, like cities and counties and, maybe nonprofits, but the state's no longer doing it at this point. And so you've got to be able to be flexible and kind of pivot and go, okay, here's what resources we were giving to folks. Let's talk about maybe in the Valley for a minute. We've got a couple of staff because we're also statewide. And so we have staff located in the Valley, in the Rio Grande Valley. And so we have, okay, let's real quick. I know we're getting all these questions, figure out what resources are down there, right? And what do we have? And let's put that information out. But I think the pandemic has really, for us, it's really forced us to be flexible and to, really look forward to. That's the other thing that we have worked on, done a lot of work on is looking forward to see what's coming next. We were 6 months ago, a year ago, talking about, all right, debt is the next big issue because that's going to prevent the housing. And so we're always looking to figure out what's coming for the clients. And so that's another piece that we've had to do.
Yeah, and the one thing I would add to that, Faye, would be in terms of, I know Mr. Basto mentioned leveraging the relationships, but how in some of the larger cities, there are people who might already be doing the work that you're looking at doing in terms of, let's say, collection of data. So for example, in our DFW area, there's a Child Poverty Action Lab who's done a lot of work to get all of the eviction filing data, and now making it available to where we can identify the hotspots in the different courts where there's an increase in eviction filings. And so it's trying to, see who's out there, see what they're doing, and don't try to reinvent the wheel. And the other about the rural areas, I agree. I think Zoom has assisted, but it has also shown that there is a digital divide. So it's hard because there's a decent subset of our community that's very difficult to reach that may not have access to the technology. So we've had to think through creative ways of getting out there and figuring out how we can do it. And that's part of, I guess, some of the funding we're doing. We have it's a home preservation project, but where we're hosting clinics in the community, because a lot of depending, our rural areas, some of them are still doing in-person, whether it's court hearings and other events, just in the nature of what it's like in rural Texas. And so that's the way that you can do the outreach. So it's kind of working with the community where you can meet them, I guess, would be my advice.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. And thanks for ending on that, working with the community when you meet them. I think that's a wonderful place to close the reflection. We have a number of questions, and just to be clear, we're not going to be able to address all of the questions. So we may need to do some follow-up after the webinar. But many of the questions sort of generated on working with different agencies, particularly HUD. I don't know if there's any comments that you have that are specific with HUD vouchers. Also for our California team, there was a question about, do you work with the state housing agency to improve outcomes for people with disabilities? Are there specific programs or funding from the state housing component, or is it much more with the legal partners? So any comments you have on working with either local or state housing agencies would be helpful.
Through our course of advocate, we're large. We're always working with all agencies, big picture, right? But evictions are so crisis based and individually based that big picture solutions don't apply. So when we have an individual client who's facing eviction, our first question is, do you have a Section 8 voucher? And if they have a HUD voucher, our legal representation, legal assistance is modified by that. And we have relationships with local housing authorities. If not, we'll find a partner. The key thing is somebody's actually receiving government assistance and that pays part of their housing. We have to preserve that government assistance. So that becomes the highest priority, right? Because that actually, government assistance for the payment of rental, like permanent or however they can afford it, is the best for stability. So that becomes a priority to preserve that voucher and work with that government agency for that case. But yeah, big picture, we're always working on on strategies on providing, developing more affordable housing, accessible housing for our clients. We're always working with that and developing better systems, fairer processes, et cetera.
Great, thank you. We also received some questions that I think sort of explaining the scope of this conversation would be helpful. So we are speaking very specifically about civil evictions from people's own landlords and tenants, but we did receive a number of questions on evictions from personal care homes and what happens in a hospital when someone's being discharged and they don't have a place to go to. I don't know, gentlemen, could you speak briefly sort of about the medical legal partnership model, very briefly, and some of the types that or anyone about the ways that healthcare can play into evictions and some of the ways that partnering with others in the healthcare system can be important?
Sure. Yeah. So with the medical legal partnership, it's a fairly flexible model. It literally is what the name describes. There's a legal partner, there's a health partner. And as I said earlier, a lot of times people are reluctant to cold call a lawyer or don't know that they can call legal aid. And there are studies that show that they're much more likely to talk to their healthcare provider, or like a healthcare provider is more likely to kind of be the first person to hear about an issue. And then it's really helpful for them to channel people over to the legal side. And I think that once people hear a tenant in crisis, for example, if they have a mistrust of legal aid, which I alluded to in my client story, if their trusted healthcare provider, their social worker at their health center, their primary care provider says, hey, this sounds like a legal issue, perhaps you should contact this legal organization, and let me connect you to them. Let me send a referral over. That connection is much more likely. And so, yeah, for the medical legal partnership, I guess on the legal side, we're really building on the trust relationship that the healthcare providers already have. So sometimes that has us going and being on site, co-located at the health center or hospital. And other times there's just a warm handoff relationship and a cross-training relationship. But it's a way to take us both, I think, outside of the silos that we are used to working in, and figure out how to collaborate across different disciplines in order to think creatively about how to reach a solution. And I will say that my work in the medical legal partnership made it way easier for me to get reasonable accommodation verifications, because the healthcare providers really trusted me for that reason. And so and I would explain what was the need for the letter or the form, compared to I think sometimes they're pretty guarded when their patients are the ones that are asking, because they don't quite understand what is the impact of signing off on a letter or a form like that.
Thank you so much. And so that, I think, kind of closes out some of the themes that we've really heard here today, which is meeting the clients where they are, being in the community where they are is key, being very aware of all of the other things that are going on in addition to their housing, what other financial needs they have, what other social services needs they have, connecting with those needs, being aware of what other partners are doing. So you all mentioned different organizations that you work with who are tracking data, advocating for systems change, working with legal interventions, and being informed and connected with them. And then also being very clear, sort of, about the expertise that you provide with the disability and civil rights, so that your legal partners and other social services partners know to come to you and have those warm referrals with clients. And then the dream of co-location in a one-stop shop where clients can go to have this full spectrum of their needs met. We are at an hour. Is there anything anyone did not have an opportunity to say or to share that you'd like to share? I know we moved through this very quickly, so I just don't want to cut us off if there was any final words or anything you all wanted to share.
Thank you for hosting.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the work you're doing. This is a very serious situation, and I know that you have a lot of client need right now, so appreciate the time and your expertise. There will be a follow-up from this on the ACL website with the frequently asked questions document, the recording of the webinar. And we appreciate you so much, Disability Rights California and Disability Rights Texas. Thank you for sharing your experience and expertise with us today. That's all from us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.